Hi, Mrs. Downing. I hope you're doing well in this little e-learning thing. I would like to start this video off by apologizing for how late it is. I have not had Wi-Fi for a long time. And while that doesn't really affect this class, because I've known that we had to read Death of a Salesman, it does just mean that I've been very stressed when I got Wi-Fi on Thursday, yesterday and today, trying to catch up with all the classwork that I missed. So due dates are a little bit wacky. I'll have my reduction of Catch-22 in pretty soon. I'm not going to do it tonight because it's 1 a.m. right now. And today was my Death of a Salesman day. But I will have that in tomorrow, because tomorrow I'm just doing my gym homework, so that shouldn't take long. And yeah, I also did not respond to anyone in the discussion post because I had a response typed out, and then it was at like exactly 11:59 they didn't let me submit the response. So I'll put a little screenshot down below of my response that I had typed out to Riley's discussion post. So moving on to the actual substance of this video, which is Death of a Salesman. I really liked Death of a Salesman. I thought it was a really good book. I thought it was really interesting. I thought it was really sad. It made me tear up a lot at the end. And I think there is a lot to discuss, so I'm just going to get into it. Death of a Salesman. I'm going to start by talking about my discussion post. So, I chose to analyze Death of a Salesman through the lens of Marxism, which I did for a few reasons. For two reasons. The first reason is that it seems kind of obvious, like when you're talking about a book that's the death of the American dream, to talk about Marxism. And the other reason is that I used to have a job that I really hated, and that job that I really hated was right next to half-price books. And I also kind of want to major in poli-sci. And so when you add all those together, you do get the fact that I have a copy of the Communist Manifesto. So when I was skimming through the Communist Manifesto to find some supporting arguments for my little discussion post, I found a thing. I did a little quote from it in my discussion post, but I would like to read it, and I would like to compare it to Death of a Salesman. So, it has resolved capitalism, has resolved personal worth into exchange value, and in place of the numberless indefeasible charactered freedoms, has set up that single unconscionable freedom, free trade. In one word, for exploitation, veiled by religious and political illusions, it has substituted naked, shameless, direct, brutal exploitation. The bourgeoisie has stripped of its halo every occupation hitherto honored and looked up to with reverent awe. It has converted the physician, the lawyer, the priest, the poet, the man of science into its paid wage laborers. The bourgeoisie has torn away from the family its sentimental veil and has reduced the family relation to a mere money relation. So, that's interesting because, like, that's exactly what this play is. When he said that it has resolved personal worth into exchange value, it immediately made me think of the scene between Willie and Howard at the very beginning of Act 2. And in this scene, he says, "I put 34 years into this firm, Howard, and now I can't pay my insurance. You can't eat the orange and throw the peel away. A man is not a piece of fruit." And in this, he's basically saying that he's being treated like a piece of fruit or like a piece of trash by his boss because he isn't making profit, which means that his value as a person has been stripped and reduced to his ability to sell, which means that his personal worth has been resolved into exchange value. You know, so I just thought that was very interesting. It also mentioned in here that the family relation becomes a money relation, and I think that that's very applicable to Death of a Salesman. When you look at Willie as the hate that his name is Willie. I'll get into names later. Oh, I will get into names later. Let me add that to my list. So, I don't think that Linda cares about, I mean, obviously she cares about how much he makes. I don't think she really needs him to be a provider. She expects that from him, but I don't think she needs it from him. You know, she always wants him to take a break if he needs one. She always is more concerned about his well-being than his money. She's still concerned about the money because, like, they have bills to pay. But I don't think she is the nagging wife type. I think that this is more expectations that Willie has put on himself to be the provider. And that is expectations that don't come from nowhere. I'm not making any sense. Willie puts a lot of pressures on himself to be a provider for his family, to make money for his family, to be strong and to be a leader. And those expectations that are put on himself, that he puts on himself, are the expectations that have been put on to him simply because he is a, like, able-bodied white man in the 20s. And he has a wife and kids. So that's the expectations that are put onto him. And they kind of end up crushing him. Along with the beliefs that have been put onto him that, you know, he can succeed and he should succeed. He's expected to succeed because he can succeed because anybody can succeed. And it ends up crushing him. But I'm getting ahead of myself because I want to talk about masculinity later. But first, I want to talk about characterization in general. I have a whiteboard here, and I'm going to use it to map out a little whiteboard here. And I want to use it because I am clearly not having a good time at, like, organizing my thoughts right now. So I have this to organize my thoughts for me. I think the characters can be split up into, like, the haves and the have-nots. So so in the the have-nots, you have the Lomans, like, all of them. But every other character in this play pretty much is a have. So, Charlie, he's not, like, I guess it's not really made clear exactly how much money he has, but he offers Willie a job. Like, he's not, he obviously is well off. Bernard, that was his name? Yes, that was his name. Howard, obviously. I guess Spencer goes in this category. Any other characters? Hi, I forgot to touch on it there because I forgot to touch on a lot of things because my brain hasn't been working for the last, like, week. But I think that maybe Miller chose to make every other character in this play very on the opposite end of the financial spectrum and, like, the success spectrum of the Lomans, because it kind of can represent how ill-equipped society is to help people out who don't fit into the American dream, and how difficult it can be to see everywhere, like, the remnants of the American dream in the people you're talking to. Like, oh, this person made it, this person made it, this person made it. So that when you don't make it, you assume something's wrong with you. When you're a minority, when you can look around and you see everyone else has it and you don't. Yeah. Oh, even though, like, the woman that they meet at the diner, who's just, like, a pretty woman that Happy talks to, is a have because she's a model. And so she's probably getting a little bit of money as a model, like a little bit. So I think there's also something interesting there in Happy's interactions with that woman. Not only because, oh my God, is he like, does that come out of left field? Like, he is so bad at talking to people, and then he sees a woman he thinks is pretty, and then he's like, we're not getting into that right now. I think that interaction is interesting because I think that he sees women as a status symbol. We're talking about this right now. I will add that too. And we're talking about this right now. I think that what is interesting is if you take the Lomans, you can take Biff. Biff and Bernard are foils, right? I kind of think that Happy and Howard are also foils. Charlie and Willie would be foils. This is getting incomprehensible. And then, sorry, Linda. But yeah, you can look very clearly at, well, not very clearly, because I'm gonna redraw this. I'll be a second. So, I think that you can kind of chart how, first off, I hate how they spelled his name. Why did you do that, Arthur? We are getting into names later. Well, we're not getting into that name later. Why did you do that, Arthur? E-Y? Oh. What was the decision? What the? Okay. I forgot to add Stanley here. Oh no. Poor Stan. So, Charlie and Willie are foiled. I think that's kind of obvious. Like, you see this very sad image of Willie begging Charlie for money and arguing with him constantly, like he cannot see the man without a fist fight breaking out. They're foils. Their parenting is very directly contrasted. What exactly does... What exactly does Charlie say about parenting? Charlie said, "My salvation is that I never took any interest in anything." He's kind of he's the opposite of Willie. He's a foil in that Willie puts too much care and attention into everything. He nagged his son too much because he was obsessed with the idea of his son becoming a success. Like, he wanted to be a success. But Charlie didn't nag his son, and then his son just ended up being very successful on his own. And what I think is interesting is that both of those are kind of sad, right? Like, you look at Charlie and that's sad. Like, he's giving money to this guy every week that he doesn't like. He's not very close to his family. He doesn't care about anything. He has all these lines about, like, how, that's the Communist Manifesto. Okay. He has all these in the same book. I love that I've accused Arthur Miller of being a communist so many times in this video when that's literally what he wrote The Crucible about, so. He has all these lines about, like, how, you named him Howard, but you can't sell that. The only thing you got in this world is what you can sell. And the funny thing is that you're a salesman and you don't know that. He has all those lines, and that's sad. Don't you see, Charlie, how sad that is? Like, both men are sad. You have two alternatives on coping with capitalism, and both of them suck, because this one ends up in death, and this one ends up in a cold, meaningless existence. I'm gonna say Bernard and Biff. I'm gonna save them. I'm gonna come back to them. Howard and Happy, I think, are foils. So both of them are people that Willie named. And something that I think is interesting is that when you learn Happy's real name, it is Harold, which is very, very, very similar to Howard. Howard, Harold, Howard, Harold, Howard, Harold. And when you look at them, when you look at the two of them, they are kind of, they're kind of foils. Like, they're kind of foils. Happy. Happy never settles down. He's constantly doing these grimy things where he's like sleeping with his boss's wife, which we'll get into. He's, you know, he's going out the night his father kills himself. I mean, he doesn't yet, but he's going out the night that it's very probable that his father is going to kill himself. And he's like just flirting with these women. But Howard is kind of a family man. Howard is wealthy, Happy is not. Howard has a very high up position in the business that he works in, and Happy lies about having a high up position. Also, Howard tells Willie the truth about how unsuccessful he really is, but Happy wants to hide it. That's like the most obvious one. I don't know why I missed it, but I don't know exactly what foiling them does. I'm still kind of stuck on that. Maybe it's like foreshadowing or something. I don't know. Here, I don't like sitting like this. I'm just gonna... I don't know exactly what foiling them does. I mean, I feel like I have kind of the same point about Howard as I do about Charlie, which is like, yes, he's successful, but isn't he sad? Like, he's not sad. He's very happy with his wealth. But isn't that a sad existence? Like, he doesn't care about anyone. He doesn't have any connections. So Bernard and Biff. Bernard is an interesting character from the second he is introduced, because you have Willie and he's playing with his son and he wants his son to be a success, right? He's obsessed with the idea of success. But you see this kid comes in who is like, at least from my perspective, he's the one that you think of as like destined to be a lawyer. And the first thing that Willie, the thing that Willie says about him, I didn't write down the page number, the facts about me. The first thing he does is say like, oh, he's anemic and people don't like him. And that just stood out a lot to me, because that's not something you would expect your friend's dad to say about you. You know, especially when you're like, hey, let's go study for that math test. He says, what are you looking so anemic about, Bernard? And it's like, bro. And then he goes later to Bernard and he asks for advice. So it's very much setting up like a... It's very sad. It's very much a downfall. I just had a thought. Is he not an archetypal hero, a tragic hero? He has... his flaw would be... Okay, well, wait, okay, let's start from the beginning. Is he noble? Because I don't think he has many redeeming characteristics. I mean, maybe if you look at it as like, in this world that's twisted, he can hold on to the tradition. But this is just me being cynical. I don't think that there ever is a good tradition in like being a salesman. I don't think we think of that as a, you know, noble career anymore. But I guess that you could say he comes from a noble family, and that like his father was a flute salesman, and his brother is like a diamond man. He has his flaw would be his dreaming, like his idealism. I'm gonna say his flaws, his machismo, his desire to like, I'm gonna get into masculinity because I think there's a lot to analyze there. And I mean, he definitely brings about his downfall. I mean, and he definitely brings about his own death. I guess he'd be a tragic hero. I just don't really think that he's that likable. I think he's very sympathetic. I just don't think that we don't see him be nice very often. We see him cheat on his wife, yell at his wife. We see him being awful to his kids. We don't ever see him make a sale or like be, you know, a charismatic person who can go in and talk to people and make these sales, because that's his big selling point for himself when he's trying to sell himself to people, is like, I can go to anywhere and I can sell, I guess I don't know what he sells. I think he sells watches. There's like one line in there that I was like, that makes me think he sells watches, but I don't know. Let me find that, because I feel like it's a thing. I feel like I very much got the vibe that it was a very intentional thing that Arthur Miller chose to not make him like a shoe salesman or a car salesman or like whatever, like a very vague kind of salesman thing. And I feel like that choice was to highlight how little it matters, I guess. Because Arthur Miller is very much focused on Willie, and he doesn't want to focus on the product he's selling. So that's my theory. I'm never going to be able to find where I think he sold watches. I'm going to move on to masculinity. Masculinity plays a huge part in Death of a Salesman. Like, bro. I think there's a lot of pressure on Willie. He puts on himself partially to be a provider for his family. I definitely see that in him. But I also think that he's a very aggressive man. He's a very self-assured man. He's a very, well, he's not self-assured. He's very insecure. He's self-deluded. But he's a very, very aggressive man. I mean, he's constantly yelling at his family. He's mean. He constantly wants to get into fist fights. And he encourages his kids to get in fist fights. On page 44, Willie says to Charlie, "A man who can't handle tools is not a man. You're disgusting." Which is so much. Willie says he's exploding on his wife. "There's nothing the matter with him. You want him to be warm? You want him to be a worm like Bernard? He's got spirit, personality." He doesn't want Biff to end up like Bernard, because Bernard is like skinny and lanky, and he's not really what you think of as like a football player, like a all-star, you know. He's got spirit, personality. That kind of made me very much feel like Willie was projecting this idea of masculinity onto Biff, and it made me kind of sad because we get introduced to Willie, and like in the first scene he's talking about how fat he is and how ugly he is and stuff, and he's not well liked at all. Like, his coworkers don't really like him, his family doesn't really like him, to put it lightly. And so you have this man who is not very attractive, and he's not well liked, and he's arguing with his wife, and he says, you know, my son doesn't need to study math because he's handsome and he's well liked, and you don't want him to end up like a nerd. And it's like, honey. Hi, really quick, because I meant to get into a character analysis for Biff and then I forgot. Speaking of football and like how he's strong and stuff, I think it's really interesting in the scene where Happy is trying to like get those girls. He's like, oh, Biff is this big football player, but Biff doesn't really play along with that. Like, everyone keeps insisting that football was the greatest thing to ever happen to Biff, and I feel like he never quite agrees with it. I definitely think that he's in the right. Like, he's the one that's right in all of this. His theft problem is interesting. I don't know what to make of it, though. But I think that he's kind of positioned as the one who, his ideals are nice. It's just for a simple life. And he can see through all the cracks in the family. And he wants to be honest. So he's the most reliable narrator of all of them, you know. You also see it a lot in Happy. The whole thing about him and the wives of his partners, or not his partners, his bosses. Oh my god. So that is masculinity and competition. That's what that one is. It is... That was so gross. We're moving on from how gross I think it is, and we're talking about the implications to the character. So I think that Happy sees himself in a position where he is not as successful as he wants to be, and he cannot take the jobs of these people. So he does what he can do, and he takes their wives. And it's a game to him, I think. Like, it's definitely all... Game isn't the right word, because it has really serious implications. Okay, he says, I don't know what gets into me. Maybe I just have an overdeveloped sense of competition or something. But I went and ruined her. And furthermore, I can't get rid of her. And he's the third executive I've done that to. Isn't that a crummy characteristic? And to top it all, I go to their weddings. Like, I'm not supposed to take bribes. Manufacturers offer me $100 bill on them, whatever. And he hates himself, and then he loves it, and okay. I think that the word choice of ruin her is very interesting. I got it. I finally understand it. He doesn't have power in his job, and he doesn't have status in his job, but like almost like stealing from these men who are above him makes him feel powerful. So it's a way where they're never going to find out. So you're never going to have to face any consequences for it, but you can still hurt them in a very real way. Like, if I hated my boss and I printed out a picture of his face and I like put it on a dartboard or something, he's never going to find out about that, and I get to vent my anger. But in the end, it doesn't hurt him But what Happy's doing is very much ruining someone's life because he feels inadequate in himself and his position in the company, which is messed up. And I think that that goes to the competitiveness of, you know, having so many expectations put on you of what success means, but I also think it has to do with masculinity, having so many expectations put on you of the power that you're expected to have, you know. So that was masculinity and Happy's sexuality and that whole thing. I want to talk about names. I want to talk about Ben. I want to talk about, and then I want to talk about a few just random notes that I took. So, names. I already talked about the Howard, Harold thing. I think that's way too close. Happy, I think, he's the most outwardly, like, cheery about them all. You know, Biff is kind of like a hardened man. Willie is a little bit, like, rough around the edges. I forgot to mention that Willie as a name sounds very childish, and the character of Willie is very childish, so I think that's fitting. I also forgot to talk about Ben, but this video is long enough, so just don't get your hopes up that I'm going to analyze Ben. No. Linda is, she's just very, like, serious and, like, she always knows what has to be done. Bernard just sounds like a lawyer. He just sounds like a little anemic. I don't like the name Happy. I'm gonna say it. I don't like the name Happy. I think I made it very clear how I felt about the names in As I Lay Dying. Same situation. Please don't name your characters Cash. Please don't name your characters Happy. I just don't like it. I don't like when names are words. I just realized my name is Grace. Hi. So, ooh, that's a little bit of aggression. That's due to my internal insecurity. What if I'm happy? No, I'm kidding. So I don't like the name Happy, but I think it's really cool, the Harold Howard thing. That's pretty cool. I want to talk about names. I want to talk about who is given names, because pretty much everyone is given names. Like Stanley, the waiter that has an ambiguous past relationship with Happy and, like, sets up the tables, talks to Willie, and that's his whole point in the plot. He's given a name, but Willie's mistress isn't. Like, the woman that Biff left home for, the woman that, like, she's not given a name. I just don't get why not, unless Arthur Miller is making a commentary about women. I think that is just that he doesn't care enough. But what if Arthur Miller is making a commentary about, like, oh, Stanley deserves a name and Howard deserves a name and, like, whatever, but these women, they're just objects in the game that people are playing. I mean, and when you look at it, like, Linda said something that really stuck with me, or, like, really stuck out to me, when she was, when they came home and they had the flowers and they, like, dropped them on the floor, and she said, like, she went to pick them up, and then she was like, no, you pick them up, I'm not your maid anymore. I'm not your maid anymore really stuck out to me. Like, she wasn't their mother, she was their maid. She always kind of saw her duties as a little bit troublesome to her. And, you know, there's even the parts early in the book where Willie kind of chastised them for not helping out their mom around the house enough. And so it could be very, I mean, I think it's commentary on gender, because there's a lot of commentary on masculinity. Why not on femininity? Femininity. On feminine stuff. So, and then I have two more things, and then I will let you go. I have two random things that I kind of was thinking of when I was reading that I took note of. And the first was that it was about postmodernism in general. I don't think this is in the era of postmodernism. When was this published? No, 1949. That's right in there. I think that I see a trend in a lot of the postmodern books that I read, personally, of wanting to go back to romanticism, and idealizing romanticism, and I like that a lot. I think that's really cool. Like, so in this book, Biff is, he is a farmer, and he's told that that's not successful enough, but he's like, I just want to go out on the western farm and stuff, and that is romanticism. I can definitely see why after the Second World War, after the Great Depression, after all of those things that you live through, wanting to go back to a much, much simpler time, where they, you know, a lot of romantic literature is about being in one with nature, and I can see definitely if Arthur Miller felt very betrayed by
late capitalism, which is a tenet of postmodernism. Also, he would probably feel betrayed by the Great Depression and the post-World War II era that he lived in, because that changed so much in the American psyche and so much relating to how Americans viewed the American dream. You know?
I don't think that he I don't think that he wants to go back to romanticism. I don't think that's a very strong theme. I don't think that Arthur Miller was necessarily like, oh, bring back romanticism. Especially considering that he had such a huge problem with Puritanism. That not inspired him to write The Crucible. McCarthyism inspired him to write The Crucible, but, you know, that he expressed in The Crucible. But I don't know. I just think it's interesting that postmodernism kind of goes back to romanticism. Like, when you look at how much has to do with Biff, with seasons and going out west and, you know, all these stuff. It's very, like, traditional. Like, it's very settler-y. Like, the settlers going into America the first time. It feels very much like that to me, or like very old. So I don't know, that's interesting.
Hi, I did also notice at some points in this play that he kind of seemed to romanticize tradition. Not just in Willie's case, but like in, oh, it used to be better for a salesman. And like when you look at his father, like that's a better life. And that makes sense when you went through the Roaring 20s and the Great Depression. You know, when you lived through both of those, to kind of romanticize, like, let's go back to before that. Before that was a lot better, when it wasn't as turbulent of times.
And then also, I'm going to bring up Jack and the Beanstalk, which is strange. But something that is interesting in Jack and the Beanstalk is the conflict between money, which you can use to pay your bills and like buy food right now, and a cow, which you can use to produce food for later down the line, and then you have goods, and then you are at a good place to sell something. So it's the difference between like basic fundamental things you need to live and money, which is a like man-made thing that you do need to live still. And when I read Willie saying, how can he find himself on a farm? Is that a life of farmhand? In the beginning, when he was young, I thought, well, a young man, it's good for him to tramp around a lot and take on different jobs. It's more than 10 years now, and he's had to make $35 a week. Even though he's working, Willie thinks, on a farm, he still isn't good enough because he's not making enough money, and it made me think of that conflict between food and money, like between very much being somewhere where you are creating something and where you can take pride in your work and where you are sustaining a lot of lives and a lot of families, and money, like selling watches, like, you know, that just kind of made me question Willie Loman a bit.
By the way, in both Jack and the Beanstalk and Death of a Salesman, Biff/Jack are perceived as right. So
I want to talk, just because I don't want to neglect it, briefly about like the last bit, and then I'll actually let you go. The last line of this play is Linda saying, "We're free, we're free." And I think it's so sad. Because what she's saying is, "Oh, I made the last payment on the house today and there will be nobody home," is such a beautiful line because it's the third time, rule of threes, haha. Also, Holy Trinity, shout out Hamlet. It is the third time that the idea is brought up in this play that you work so hard to build your house and then nobody's there to live in it, or like you can't live in it. There's the line, I have it in my notes, I don't want to go through and find where I highlighted it. "Figure it out, work a lifetime to pay off a house, you finally own it and there's nobody to live in it." Foreshadowing, what? And then there is the idea of, I think it was Happy's boss, who had a house that he remodeled and then he lived in it for like a month and then he sold it. And that's kind of like, why would you, and they were talking about like, why would you remodel a house and you don't even get to live in it? And then that at the end, the idea of these really wealthy exteriors but nothing going on inside, like no family going on inside, is what this book is about. Now that I'm thinking of it, it's kind of common in like American Dream is Dead genre of literature, of which I've only read The Great Gatsby and now Death of the Salesman, but kind of like of constantly reaching to achieve something and never grabbing it. So in Great Gatsby, it was the like green light and it was Daisy and it was all that implies, and here it's just like the house, which can represent the family, it can represent stable life you want, it can represent like status, houses can be status symbols, a lot of things that Willy Loman wanted and that are a big part of the American dream. But I also liked the last lines, like "I'm free," or "we're free, we're free." It is kind of like he could offer more in his death than he could in his life, which was really sad, but I think he held on to his beliefs very, 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 very strongly until the end.
And I think his beliefs were kind of poisonous to him and his family and his wife, and I think that it's kind of like when she says "we're free," maybe she's talking about herself and her kids and him, like there's freedom in death, but you know.
Oh, I want to talk about one thing and then I'll actually be done. I really, really liked the exchange between Bernard and Willie. It was so cool and sad. Bernard said, "If at first you don't succeed, yes, I believe in that. But sometimes, Willie, it's better for a man just to walk away." Walk away? That's right. But if you can't walk away, I guess that's when it's tough. I really liked that line. First off, I liked it because when I read it in my head, I read it as like, you know, if at first you don't succeed, yes, I believe in that. Like, he's like so ready. And it's, if at first you don't succeed, try again is such a basic, you know, catchphrasey way of just saying the American dream. And Willie is so quick to affirm that he does believe in it. And I really like just the, oh, then I guess that's tough, because it's like there really aren't any answers. When you probe deeper and deeper and deeper into the American dream, you just get a whole lot of nothing. And that's sad, but I think that that's a really interesting thing to include in a play, and I really liked it. Oh, okay. So I am going to head out and edit this video and then send it to you.